without further ado, we are going to now transition to our next panel. And our next panel is really going to discuss how you can do your research in a fast and thorough way. For a lot of us in emerging companies, especially in emerging companies, you grow on the go. You grow on the go and you have to achieve things while company dynamics is changing, while goals are changing, and you have to adapt very quickly. And that is going to be the topic of the next panel. And I'm going to bring in our panelists today for this session. Hey, Roman, how are you? You can share your video now.
Hello, doing well, and yourself?
Pretty good, pretty good. Thanks for being with us today.
Good to see you, Roman.
Akos, the stage is yours.
Okay, I'm going to also need Josh and Jim on the stage, please.
Yes, they're gonna come in 1 second.
Okay, amazing. Then I'll just do the introduction for the current session, and it's a bit. I called it "Doing Research Fast and Thorough." It's well, when I thought about this panel, I thought of Vin Diesel and Fast and Furious, but that didn't really match with the purpose of the panel. Because in the first panel, we discussed why research matters, why it's important to do continuous research. And what I'd like to dig into with you guys is how to do it efficiently and how to be time efficient with that, and look at like good practices, tricks that you either like learned yourself by doing or saw with your clients. And so the rules of the game, they are similar. I have a number of questions that I prepared. I'm gonna just distribute them randomly among you. I urge you to reflect on each other's thoughts. And maybe what you can also do in the very beginning when you answer the first question is just say a couple of sentences about yourself, so people know like, your background and what they can position you on this world map of professional world. All right, so now we have Josh, Jim, and Roman here. To all of you. So what I'd like to do is actually a quick round of survey among the three of you. And the question is, if you decide to do discovery interviews, and let's say with 10 customers, how long does it roughly take you to get from this decision until you have learnings that you can share with your colleagues? Just it doesn't have to be scientific, just give us a ballpark. Jim, you want to go first?
Sure. I think for a team that's already together, who's done maybe some discovery before, I would say this is about 2 to 4 weeks.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I think it really depends as well on the scope and the number of users. It's not just the only thing to take into account, but also like the type of user you're talking to, how you want to organize around that. But I would say, yeah, 3 weeks is a sweet spot.
Roman?
Yeah, I think that sounds like an eternity to me. But so Roman Smigel, I've been doing product work for like 28 years. My background is finance and with some philosophy and psychology involved. And I've been doing lots of crazy stuff. And I'm in the coffee market right now, CPO for doing coffee stuff. But I would say if you want to go fast and furious in efficiency, I think 4 days, like a design sprint. And the key thing is templatizing, making sure you have your templates ready and going and cutting out anything that's not necessary.
Cool. Thank you. Let me throw the first question at Josh, or not the first, the second one. Josh, you're from Miro, an awesome company. By the way, a loyal user. Even FigJam couldn't convince me to get distracted. But we're not here to promote. I think the tool itself promotes itself. So the point, what I wanted to ask is, you said like 3 weeks. What keeps you from being faster? What are the typical roadblocks and hurdles to be faster?
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I think, by the way, that 4 days is an amazing turnover for this. So I would be very keen to learn how to accelerate this. But the way I think about research has 5 different steps, right? It's planning, recruiting, interacting with the user. In this case, we're talking about interviews, then analyzing, and finally documenting and sharing. That for me is just 2 coins of the same thing, right? And what prevents me from going faster is if I look at each of these 5 steps. The first one in planning would be alignment, right? It's not always clear the type of questions, the research questions that we want to focus on, and how to turn those into interview questions in this case. So it needs alignment with the different people from the team. And then what you don't want it to rush into, recruitment, which is the second one, not knowing which are the right questions, because that impacts which type of people you want to talk to, right? And how many different groups, and how big do you want the sample, and all that. And also, like, potentially how much do you need to reward that type of profiles for the time. And then the interaction itself is the one that it's more self-contained. So in there, it depends on how many sessions the team can take a day, right? Me personally, I don't like taking more than 3-4 sessions per individual, because I think after the 3rd or 4th session, you don't start paying the attention that it requires. But of course, if there is more people involved, you can take more per day. And then finally, the analysis, it depends on the amount of information that you're collecting as well. And documenting and sharing, it will also depend how much you need to share it. Like, what's the scope of the research? Is it something more long-term? Then you might need to adapt different parts of the report and the presentation for different type of audiences that you want to share in. And the same with all sorts of documentation that you're creating, right? Like, it will really depend on the scope of the research. But those would be, like, let's say, the stopping points for each step of the process, in my opinion.
Jim, you have any thoughts or stories to share?
Sure. A little background on my part. I've been a product discovery coach for about 8 years now, and through my teams, done about 700 of these interviews, and seen a variety of cycles, from the sprint that Roman's talking about to much longer cycles. I think, when I think of 10 users, we're usually recruiting like 12 or 13 to talk to 10. So there's a little bit of churn in there. I'm also thinking in 10 users, I want to do like 2 cycles. I want to have a prototype and a concept, show it to 5, then have another like mini round of design so I can kind of tweak it. And so I'm actually adding time on purpose when I'm talking to 10. And then there's a little bit about sustainability. So, like, how many times can my teams get together and sprint, versus if I'm a boss and I want my team to be fast but thorough, it's like a sustainability thing. So, like, they've got things in delivery, they've got things that they should be measuring. There's other things they're doing as a regular product basis for product teams. So I think I slow it down because I know that they can't maintain that cadence if it's too fast. And what they're kind of like, really, they'll really put a lot of energy into it, and then there'll be this lull afterward where they won't do discovery for a long time because they're just tired. Like Josh was saying, the kind of tiredness of talking to users. So there's something about stretching it out in that way. But like Roman said, you can absolutely, if you need to, you could do it.
So Roman, let's dig into your process, because it seems like an interesting one and thought-provoking. Can you share with us how you do it in 4 days, and how you came to this? I think that would be also interesting to hear your journey to come up with this approach.
Yeah, like, I think all good product people are thieves. You steal versus reinvent it. This area has been around for so many years, and I think everyone always has a better way, or they want their own way. Why not steal the patterns that work? So when you look at a typical design sprint, there's the old style of doing 5 days and the newer style of doing 4. And how did I come across this? So, like, over lots of years, probably like Jim knows, you kind of see patterns. Like, a design sprint in 4 days is something that you usually do over 6 months. But this distillation down is to get you very focused and to execute and do something amazing. I think I've seen this work the best. I think it was like 5 or 6 years ago at Flaconi. We did 2 design sprints, and they were 4 days to prove a concept. And it's a very great way of finding out, like throwing something on the wall, being very focused, picking about 3 to 5 people, because there's research that shows that after about 3 or 4, you see the pattern. And then you kind of iterate. And how do you move fast and furious to show off all your research? You pick a methodology like the Wall of Justice, you know? And you can use something which was called real-time board a long, long time ago when I first started using it, to Miro. And you just have all your screens, the people, reds, greens, boom, 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 boom. You quickly document, you summarize, and you move forward. So we did it because we wanted to align the whole company, move forward on an area that we weren't sure. And how could we do this fast enough? And if you look at a 2-week sprint, if you're executing, you do 4 days, you recruit, you do all this stuff. The last day, which is the 5th day, you summarize, and then you can build out your tasks, and then you can build out an MVP or like a lightweight prototype the following week in 4 days or in 5 days. So that was kind of the general approach. It was stealing stuff. It was captured through Google, through the Sprint book, and so on. So it's just something that's become far more popular over the years. But I find that to be an incredibly powerful tool. Fast and furious, get to the point, move on. Don't get stuck in the details. Once you get stuck in the details, you have thousands of requirements, and it doesn't matter. So, and if you have research questions, you should probably have one core one, and then you have a series of 4 or 5 in there that you're cycling through as a hypothesis. You probably modify that question in a little bit slightly different way because people answer questions a certain way. And then you have 2 or 3 stuffers. You templatize the demographic and the closing, and you're ready to go. And boom, 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 you're done.
Sweet. This actually brings me to the next topic I wanted to throw in, because as Josh walked us through, there's like a lot of steps, many micro steps in the research process, from the moment you come up with your research plan until you present your learnings. And the question to you is, and let's start with Jim this time. What is it that you think like a good steps in this process that can be automated, and what are good examples have you come across? You're on mute yet.
Automated in which part?
That's the question. So which
Okay.
parts do you think can be and should be automated to be more efficient?
Yeah, I mean, I think that finding users, getting that stream of people showing up in your calendar, is something Teresa Torres talks a lot about. So how can these people show up on your calendar so that you can talk to them? And there's this sort of movement of like doing discovery in cycles. And then there's this, well, I expect you to be doing discovery. You of course need users as input. So users become the forcing function to your research. And what that means for teams is that they need to have a couple types of research to be ready. So I'll have them have like 3 most important questions. So let's say they don't have a prototype or solution test. But when that automated user comes in and they've got the interview for half an hour, 45 minutes, they've got something to talk to them about and to extract some value. When they got solutions to test, then they can test those solutions. So for me, all those ways to automate the user showing up on your calendar, there's screening questions they need to answer. Are your screener questions good enough to get the right person? So you're typically refining those. And I do think that you can refine your screener questions to get people to sort of automatically show up. There's some business-to-business use cases where you might want to talk to somebody before they get on the phone, but I like that area. I've not yet moved into automated like prototype creation through AI. Haven't done that. Haven't seen that work. Haven't seen analysis of conversations do that well. I think summarizing them is okay, but you miss the power of verbatim quotes. But I'll stop there and let someone else finish the answer. But that's the first thing that comes to mind.
Okay. The other 2 guys, do you have anything else to add? Could be examples, could be stories, could be cool tools that you used. Jim mentioned recruiting. As I think that's like that was the most dominant part.
Yeah, I can go next. I was just waiting in case Roman had a point. But so when I think about automatizing, for me, this is part of research jobs at the end of the day, right? And when I think about research jobs, the most painful part, or the part that you want to invest more energy, because normally the most challenging one is definitely recruiting, right? From at least the steps that I mentioned. Then said, so it is difficult to automatize recruiting, right? So one of the ways that I've experienced in the past, or I've experimented with in the past, is taking a stream of the data we get from users in forms of feedback. So we're constantly collecting feedback from users in surveys, or small forms that you send when there is some type of use in the product, and then trying to classify the type of topic that the users are discussing in there, and try to reach out if they are subscribed, of course, to communications. You have to be GDPR compliant, which is another challenge that you face in that case. So there are ways of standardizing that part. And then for the analysis as well, I think that lately the new tools are very, very good and proficient in transcribing, for example, interviews, and giving you the topics, and making it very easy to find the quotes, and creating highlight reels that are like, like sort of affinity clusters of topics that have been discussed. Of course, like the elephant in the room in this case is AI as well, right? That I personally have experimented with, but I'm not a heavy user in terms of analysis for research session, partially because I believe that there is an important step in the analysis, which is thinking about what you've experienced, right, with the team, and like reading back and forth, starting to connecting the dots. This is something that the AI is not most of the times able to do. AI is very good to kind of spotting the patterns and giving you like highlights, but that's not everything that you normally need. And another thing that came to my mind about automatization, and I'll wrap it up with this, is that something I recommend doing, and I do myself, I'm a big fan of doing this, is creating, like sort of documentation for everything. Like I like leaving breadcrumbs of I did this by doing that type of documentation, in which you leave a trace or a checklist of the steps that you followed. If there were templates, as Roman was mentioning, it's also very powerful, because if someone else wants to piggyback on that later, they will be able to do so. And then this way, you're kind of automatizing the whole process by creating a global checklist for that specific type of research effort you're conducting, that anyone will be able to replicate in the future if it's well done. Otherwise, you will hear the questions from them. So it's also good feedback.
Yeah, from my standpoint, I would just add that I don't know if it's automating, but I think it's just having access to a nice pool of candidates is always easy, but you can always go to where they're at and quickly recruit that way too. So like, since we work in the coffee area, if you go to a cafe, you pre-qualify, boom, you're there. And I think that's pretty powerful. The nice thing that I've seen with AI, I don't know how many of you use Clarity, so Microsoft Clarity. It's a screen tracking, and it has heat maps, and they incorporated in this little AI kind of widget. And what it does is it quickly analyzes your video and gives you a summary. And I think this is quite good to look at like mass amounts of things that you may have missed, and it gives you a nice pattern to then deep dive. And I think this is a very cool thing, because the point of qualitative research for me is that it's about one question, but it's not about a standardized set of questions. It's like their guidance to help you deep dive when you notice a pattern that sounds interesting. And that's the beauty of it versus quantitative, where you can automate a bunch of stuff. This, pick who you want, boom, wham, bam, you have a bunch of data. Now you can go to the qualitative stuff.
Cool. Let's since you guys brought up AI, it would have been my next topic. So you provided the great segue. My question was, or is, where do you use AI today in the research process? And what are the pros and cons? What's your experience with it? Where does it shine, and where do you think it fails or needs to get better? And I'm not going to pick a person now, so I'm just going to see who jumps at the question first to change the dynamics.
I think for mass, so I'll jump in for like, if you're doing mass videos and you want to see a pattern, I think that's quite good. But, you know, having a dialogue with a person, unless it really knows what you want it to say and to figure out, because it's kind of like you're playing a two-way communication street. So like, I think with AI, if you start to do that too much, you probably get into this loop of it responding and then that responding, and they kind of get together to figure out how they want to answer each other versus really finding out insights. So I think for lots of information, if you're doing lots of recordings and other stuff, and then you want to maybe review or do a quick take of like, have we missed anything from loads and loads of videos? It's quite good, I think, or transcribing and other stuff. But outside of that, at least for now, I wouldn't use it. In the future, it may be pretty good, I would say. But right now, it's not there. It's probably good for finding out patterns, and that's it.
Yeah, I can go next, Jim, if you don't mind. I think on top of what Roman is saying, another use I give more often is actually rewriting. I'm not a native speaker, right, in English. And, you know, I think it's very important to make sure that at least what you're writing, and I'm trying to think in which phases I use this more for rewriting, but I guess it's more when you are creating the presentation or report or however you document the findings. I think sometimes it's difficult to encapsulate such a complex information in a paragraph, and, you know, like, you also need to take into account that the attention span that the people is going to put on your report is not unlimited. So you definitely want to have like things there that are crystal clear. So what I like doing is I write stuff and then I bounce it back with AI to see if there is a better way to rewrite that in a more engaging way, for example, if that's the objective. Or if we're talking about, you know, like questions, I also want to be them very, very clear so that everyone understands those questions. That's maybe more useful for surveys, but can also be applied to interview guides. So yeah, definitely rewriting, or at least, you know, getting inspired of how to say certain things with a clear purpose in mind is one of the uses I personally give to AI, to generative AI.
I'll just say as a coach, I don't have my own captive interviews. So the data is often my client data, and they have not yet a lot of them haven't become comfortable or have sort of specific bans on using generative AI. So throwing in their future ideas, which is inherently what we're doing in discovery, you know, they're not necessarily that comfortable. I know people are doing it, but I haven't had a chance to really do much with it.
Okay, I want to pick up a question from the audience because it relates to what we're discussing, and it comes from the angle of data security and data privacy when you use AI. And the question is, how do you balance security and privacy? When you work in product development, how do you handle the concern of sharing private and confidential content that we wouldn't want to share, and just providing it to like ChatGPT or whichever other tool out there? What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so in our case, like, PII information is something that we put in the first you know, priority of everything we do. Since the moment, as I was saying in the very beginning, that we recruit someone, we want to make sure we're not reaching out to people who said that they don't want to be reached out. And of course, in an ideal world, if we could reach those people, we could get access faster. But then in this case in particular, what we did even before we started using AI, or some of us might be using AI, is we always remove PII information, you know, like personal identifiable information from any report. So you wouldn't be able to know who said what. And you know, we create like fake names, and we never display images that are real images next to potential quotes that we're reporting. So we make it impossible for anyone really in the organization to identify who said that, right? And then in terms of AI, it's the same principle. We don't, or yeah, I don't think we grab all the information, throw it to AI and say, think for us and bring it back. It's more like specific pieces of the research study that we want to, you know, get a I take, I understand AI as another person sitting on the table, right? And I ask them the questions that I know they are best at, but I am also very conscious that it's another person on the table, and I try to treat that as another person on the team that doesn't necessarily need to know everything about the people that we are dealing with from a user perspective, right? So yeah, just being careful of not mixing and including information that it's sensitive in this case. It's how we prevent this from happening.
I think I've really nothing else to add. I think it's the same thing. We try to abstract some of this information, and like with even in Clarity, the core information of who someone is abstracted, and then you kind of see all of the private information blocked out, and it's enough for the AI to kind of figure out what is there, and that's it. And then when we do user interviews and so on, it's usually two people, and we always abstract who it is and so on. We have similarities of pictures and this stuff, but it's never the exact person. And then, like, for videos or other things, there's a typical data privacy time frame where, after 1 year, after 6 months, we delete it and that's it, and we just have some transcripts.
It's actually made me think, if I can add, sorry, Jim, very quick. If I can add, like, in the very beginning, when this started to be a thing, we didn't want to use it because we were like, wait, we need to understand what this means, in terms of privacy. And we were not using it for a while, but then it became literally impossible to prevent this from happening. And the first thing we did was to, reach out to legal and try to understand, hey, this is happening. Like, at some point, we'll need to, surf the wave as everyone else. So what are like the limitations that we need to take into account and all that? And yeah, they gave us the green light in that sense. And then we followed the procedures since then. And I think as researchers, we're used to that type of limitation, so it's not a big deal.
This might be a slightly different, crowd between the US, where I'm based, and Europe, where, I do ask users, can we use your video and information internally to improve our product? And I will use their video information internally to improve the product. There's no reason to include like their last name. I usually do like a first name and an initial, but I will include screenshots of their face. And I do encourage that as a way to make users real. I find that people who work in offices, who work on software, they get too attached to personas, and the personas become more real than real people. And so I don't necessarily believe in obfuscating everything about people. I understand there's some risk, but I do have people purposely approve the ability to use the stuff internally. As you put that into external tools, you have to figure out legally whether these tools fit your legal criteria. And so and then you have to decide whether you trust that company, right? So they may have stated terms and conditions that they do wall off the data, and that they do have a data, they delete it within 6 to 12 months. But again, legally, these aren't necessarily, you have to decide what's the law, and you have to decide what's your company policy. I encourage teams to make the research feel real. And if you can get some benefit out of it and it's legally permissible, then you can use that to your advantage, perhaps. But if it's not legally permissible, or your company doesn't allow you to do it, then don't do it.
Yeah, cool. On AI, I also wanted to ask you guys, like, do you think it's going to make product teams lazier because they can do so many things and bypass steps? Or is it going to build them like additional muscles so they can do research faster? And probably the world is the two ends of the scale, like a very lazy and very powerful researcher and product manager. But I'm just thinking to what extent or how you see that of outsourcing a little bit the thinking to AI and thinking that it can answer some questions better than humans, and not taking the time to go through.
I think if it's used well, it gives you a little more time, because I think if you look at product work, I'm not a researcher by trade. I come from doing product management, figuring out what's ticking in someone's head. Why top of mind, top of heart? Why are they really hiring us to do something? So I see it that research is usually done the least amount. It's always like, I think it should be this way. So if you have something that's helping you out, it's giving you a little more time to breathe and to think about things, because, requirements are key. But if you're spending all your time doing requirements, when are you spending time talking to other people? And I think it gives you a balancing act for that. At least that's what I would see.
Unfortunately, I have to go, but I've got one comment for here is that if AI is the sum of our current understanding, usability is something that's well understood, that's well researched, that's well documented. And I could see computers doing a lot of this area. What I find that humans in product all over the world aren't doing well is what's the value of this? What's the hypothesis I've got for this particular thing? And so I don't expect AI to come up with good hypotheses about the future of the company and the future of the product because it doesn't really exist in the data that it's collected. It's possible it might come out with something interesting like that. I've yet to see anything terribly interesting, but I would say that between value testing and usability testing, I would be happy to see computers help things be less confusing and have product teams really focus on what that next thing would be. So. Thanks, Akos. Thanks, Roman. Thanks, Josh.
Well, that was like a mic drop. I think that yeah, to share a little bit of my thoughts about your question. I think the AI provides it's a tool, right? And if we think of other tools that have brought like a sort of paradigm shift. What happens here in this case, the way I see it is it provides the luxury of moving from creators to reviewers in an extreme way, right? So you no longer have to take care if you want to. Again, this is like an extreme use case, but if you want, you no longer need to rely on you thinking about creating a piece of text, for example, and assuming that that the first result or the result that you're looking for is good enough for what you're trying to do, and moves your responsibility as an individual to review and to tweak that result, right? So that's as Roman was saying, that kind of gives you more space to do other type of stuff, right? So I think it definitely will impact how we think about certain roles and responsibilities. But I would never say that it makes us lazier, right? The fact that you stop doing certain things because it can be automated by a machine doesn't make you lazier. Back in the day, to switch on a lamp, it took a lot of effort. Today is a switcher. Does it make you lazier to switch on a light? No, it's just easier, right? So you can focus on other stuff. So I think it's kind of the same idea.
Just jumping in for a second to this amazing conversation. We got a question asking, based on the theme of this discussion, how to perform research fast and thorough. How do you go about balancing time, we need results now, and quality? So for the startup community that is attending here and is asking this question, CEOs, CPOs, everyone is like, now. How do you go about balancing time and quality?
So like before you get started with everyone, there's a continuum. So, it's like you can't have the best quality now immediately. So there's a continuum of fast or slow, high quality, low quality, long time, short time. And you have to pick that when you're doing things and then stick with it. And it's all about prioritization. So product is always about prioritization and making compromises. So you cannot do everything, and you turn it back and say, hey guys, do you want this now or do you want this now? And for me, software is very communal. So it's not just product saying what and, engineering. It's all of us kind of working together. Yes, it's not a democracy, but it's working and really figuring out what is the most important thing right now. And that's pretty much it. That's how I'd answer the question.
Yeah, when you asked this question, Matti, first thing that came to my mind is this book by Rob Fitzpatrick, The Mom Test, which is an amazing book, right? And in this book, I would say the main idea that stuck with me was that research is more like an attitude, right? So it's all about learning about users. So we tend to, as I was doing in the very beginning, when they asked me like about the research process, I'm like, yes, this is the research process, and this is when we're gonna do this and that, and there is a certain planning. But at the same time, if you acknowledge that you can continuously be learning about users, you can adopt this attitude of every time you have an interaction with someone that might be someone you can learn from. just do it. And again, like I won't go into details on how to. I think it's a short book and really nice written, so I would definitely encourage to do that. But I really like this idea of guerrilla testing, right? It's not for every type of projects, but I think it's important to embrace this idea of you can learn about users in many forms. You can go to forums, you can go to where they are, as Roman was saying as well, right? So it's not just about, you know, making the most efficient process for planning, recruiting, analyzing, etc. But it's also about finding ways that are like more lightweight and less process heavy, in which you can also learn from users, right? Or another example is live intercepts, which is called time conscious research in certain books as well. This idea of placing a sort of, it's like fishing, you know, like you place like a sort of small window to collect feedback on your website, and then you wait till someone answers, and then the next question is, hey, would you like to jump for a quick chat now? And then there you go. You can dedicate some time in situ to have this conversation with that users about that particular thing that you're interested, right? So there are definitely ways in which you can work around this idea of following the whole process. And I would tend to agree that it has a cost, right? Like the fact that you can plan and recruit the right people, it's about probabilities. It's about probabilities of, you know, asking the right questions to the right people. But you know, if you're willing to risk that part and embrace that, the fact that you can also play the game of going faster with a little bit more risk, definitely do it. It's also fun.
And you touched about something very, very important here, Josh, and that's the recruitment, right? And especially in a grow on the go environment like emerging companies, the logistical part of getting the audience is probably one of the most time consuming elements. And you have companies like us at Airtime that obviously that's our job, that's what we can help you do. But assuming all other things that you need to take into consideration, and Roman, you can jump into that as well. What are kind of the best practices that you have on getting the right audience for your research quickly, so you can report up or parallel very quickly on your finding? How do you recruit? What are your best tips on recruiting users very quickly?
Go where they are. I think this is like probably the key aspect. Another aspect, very, very easy, is like, if you're sending emails, why not do the Outlook approach and have a little thing like, hey, you love our order, you love this thing, do you want to do user research? And you can't believe how many people love to do user research this way. Or Atlassian does an amazing job of having a little help icon. You click on it, it's like, hey, we answered your question, do you want to do this? So if you can have these kinds of things, amazing way of finding them. But the simplest thing is go where they're at. And that's pretty much it. And that's the fastest thing. Or you can also use, really kind of interesting, here in Germany, we've used like eBay Classifieds. It's no longer eBay Classifieds. You just post. LinkedIn, you can post just little teasers, little images. Certain things are key things that people are looking out for. And those are the people that at least are good. You have a large audience that are coming in, pre-qualify them and move on. The design sprint community does that quite a bit. Like they'll post in a variety of different forums, and this is how they quickly move, like Facebook, LinkedIn, the social media aspects, targeting a specific ad. And it's really, really fast to get people in that way. Are they perfect? Probably not, but you're looking for, you know, a certain area, and then you can double down once you get into a specific feedback cycle that you want to get into.
Interesting. That's very useful. Josh?
Yeah, those are all fantastic tips. I was trying to think of more that works. So assuming that the miracle of ending up talking to someone after they've scheduled the time in the calendar and they show up, what I try to do is as well, at the end of the session, try to assess if that's a person worth talking to again, right, for a specific topic. Maybe you've recruited them for a certain part of the product, but you realize that might have been better for another one. So I always ask them the question, hey, do you want to be reached out in the future? And if so, we create like a sort of pool or user advisory panel in which we kind of classify users by topic, so to speak, right? And those people are normally active and quick to respond. So if you're looking into a specific topic, you know who to go to straight if they are on that list. And another thing that is related to this to do at the end of the session is to ask those people to put you in touch to people they might know from the network, to introduce to people they might know, to talk about the very same thing, right? So you create this sort of referral program, so to speak, by using that network effect. It might be someone from the same company, but it might be also, you know, like ex-colleagues or someone they know on LinkedIn, and then you basically follow their leads and try to get to those people. So those are ways to reuse kind of the very same users for different learnings, and or invite new people that they might know. And then everything else that it has to do with, you know, like how to attract those users in the first place. Like I would say rewarding is key, right? Like it's not that people just move for the money, but of course, if there is some sort of compensation at the end, it will be easier to attract those people. So try to compensate according to who you're trying to get in. And then don't spam as well, right? Like make sure that if aligned with marketing, and
rule number one, don't spam.
Yeah, if they receive, it's very basic, right? But if they receive like a message that morning from the marketing team, and then you send them in the next hour one for research, they'll be like, this company is just, you know, spammers. I don't want to pay attention to their emails. So you don't want to burn out those sorts of communications.
Speaking of the topic of fast and thorough, we have a couple of minutes left. I'd like to, with your permission, dive into your personal experiences. And if you can come up on the spot with a personal story that, you know, of how you had to change your research direction based on an emergent need that just came up, and how did you kind of shifted your research approach? So you were doing something, CEO, CPO, whatever it is, coming in saying, we have to do this. How do you go about switching the order? What are your tips for those who need to do so?
So I never experienced this idea of, you know, someone else comes from whatever level and says like, we need to switch the order. What happened though, very often, especially if you have something you're testing, like any sort of design artifact, is that you want to iterate. And for me, the first and two sessions, like normally are mostly for iteration. Like I don't expect any good findings out of them, because I acknowledge that probably we're not asking the right questions, or maybe we've made a mistake assuming that those were the right people to talk to. So I think it's very important that, especially in the first debriefs after the session, you sit with the team to assess not only what you've learned, but also if what you're doing works. And if it doesn't, change it, right? So examples of that happens many times, because again, it's something that I believe should happen. But I cannot think of any, you know, like insane change on the scope, or sudden change on the scope, to be honest.
Roman?
Yeah, I wouldn't see any massive changes either. Usually it's small, incremental. Like after the first 2 or 3, you kind of see a pattern, and then you pivot. But you always have a focus for doing user research. I would never do more than like one hypothesis. So, and in the end, I'm usually the decision maker. So I say no. I first ask why, and then I say no. And then I offer options.
That's important, to first ask why and then say no, not to just say no as they come.
Yes.
That is brilliant. Okay, very well. I'm going to check with our audience here again. First and foremost, Roman and Josh, thank you so much for being with us. We have Marcus, our next panelist, coming for the next discussion already. Brilliant conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your insights and your time today. We really appreciate it.